Hey everybody, what's up? All right, so in this video, what I want to talk about is there's sort of it appears like a possible revolution in the front end web development world and really web development in general. And to explain some of the background around this, anybody that's been involved in Node.js, you know that NPM has been around for quite some time. So like NPM, Yarn, package managers. We install something with Node using npm, and it installs like half the internet. You get into all kinds of dependency hell, and then there's also the concept, which is different from npm and all that, which is really deploying monolith applications versus micro front ends. So micro front ends use microservice APIs. Those are just endpoints, APIs, HTTP, just standard way that we communicate with the web servers. We send CRUD application requests like create, read, update, delete. But those go to stateless endpoints that are sitting on a server somewhere. So you're passing data, getting data back from the server. Server's taking some sort of action for it. One of the big issues that comes into building applications, though, is that we create monolith applications that require large releases, a lot of coordination. When new features are added to an application, a lot of people have to be involved to make sure that everything goes in right and that the entire project is up and running correctly. So what everybody's trying to do, it seems like in this day and age, is to create what is called micro front-end services or front-end microservices. And an example of that is Single Spa. This Single Spa project was created several years back, and it's really about creating your application in multiple little chunks of applications. The benefit of doing that is that teams are able to work in isolation from one another. They can create pieces of an application from basically the start to the finish without having to rely on other teams. Now that is in a nutshell, and that's not exactly the way that it ends up working out, but Single Spa is a project that's built around that. So an example is that any one of these pieces of your web application is essentially its own web application with its own dependencies. It can run in isolation, and then you have essentially a container project which puts all of these applications into one application to make it all run. So I know that's a little confusing, but let me go ahead and give an example of the revolution that's going on right now. So Single Spa, like I said, is a couple years old. We have now this Federated Modules, and Federated Modules is created by this developer, Zach Jackson. He works at Lululemon as a principal engineer, and I'll get more into him in just a moment. So the reason why Federated Modules are a big deal is that Federated Modules were created by Zach Jackson, who is also one of the principal creators and maintainers of Webpack. So he's been working on this Federated Modules for a long time, and it's not really to be confused with Single Spa. It's actually more used in coordination. In fact, Single Spa has a mention of module federation, which is really like getting a lot of buzz lately. So it says, is a Webpack specific technique for sharing build time modules. It involves each micro front end bundling all of its dependencies, even the shared ones. This means that if there are multiple copies of each shared dependency, one per micro front end. So what this also does is that if two different applications have the same dependencies, the first time it comes along a dependency that is shared, it's going to use the first implementation of that. So you're not going to have a situation where you're downloading and you have your project that is using multiple shared dependencies. And if you've known anything about like tree shaking, that was a problem. When we bundle monolith applications into one large JavaScript file, there used to be a situation where we would end up bundling, and I'll just say jQuery as an example, which is old school, but if there were like 5 components that imported jQuery, and sometimes different versions, it would actually bundle all that stuff together and it wouldn't really know. But then once we got tree shaking involved, tree shaking was smart enough to look at that and say, okay, you've already requested this dependency, and we're not going to go ahead and bundle this dependency over and over again. So your bundle sizes got smaller and your application got more performant. So with Single Spa, it is actually responding to basically what is the threat of module federation. That's essentially, hopefully not going to make the project obsolete, but they're basically saying that you can use System.js or you can use the Federated Modules method. So it's saying it recommends the System.js version, but we'll see how it goes. It also mentions that module federation is still under heavy development, so you can see it's an evolving technology. All right, so here's the creator of Federated Modules talking about how you can use this. So application A and application B, you can see say hello from application A. So application B is communicating directly with a separate application, which is A. And then, so basically there's communication back and forth. To see it better in an example, this is a Stack Blitz example of two different apps that are running inside of one project. So you have app 1 over here and app 2. App 2 has its own public folder, its own index.html, and the same with app 1. So the source here is, this is using just simple React and the JavaScript version of React versus TypeScript. And you can see app 2 is also using the same thing. So if we look inside here, it's using JSX and React. So both of these applications have a shared dependency of React. So React won't be loaded twice. It's only going to have, since it's a shared dependency, it's only going to be loaded one time. So one of the things that makes this possible is this lerna.json file. So this Lerna project actually goes back several years. It's also an open source project. And you can see it's a tool for managing JavaScript projects with multiple packages. So essentially, Lerna is being used to actually house and contain these separate applications and turn them into one. So to see an even better example, I found this open source project because I was looking for federated module use. And even before I show that real quick, let me share this. So as I mentioned before, these federated modules, they were created by one of the maintainers of Webpack itself. The code is not open source at this moment. So I'll get to the creator in just a moment, but he seems to be really excited and almost like he's sitting on a gold mine, and the dude probably already gets paid a lot of money. So it sounds like he's like sitting on a gold mine, and that he thinks that he's going to make millions of dollars off this, and he probably will. But anyway, so you can see module federation is being talked about in Webpack. But one of the things you'll have to know is that Webpack 5 recently came out, and the only way you can tap into the module federation plugin, which allows this magic to work, is if you use Webpack 5 or greater. So it's all using the latest and greatest here. There's not a whole lot of documentation, though, as far as how you would actually go about setting up a lot of this stuff, or really making complicated things more than just what we saw, which was rather basic. So what I like about this project, though, is this person took the time to actually set up the same example, but instead of using just JavaScript React, he's actually using TypeScript React, which is, I'd say, a little bit more common these days. So what I did is I cloned this project and got it running on VS Code here. And looking at the files, I was actually going through all the node modules to kind of see what was going on under the covers. But you can see it's still using Lerna.json in this, so Lerna, which uses this as a configuration file. What's interesting is that there's a package.json in the root file. The only dependency is Lerna. And then you see there's some start, scripts, build, prepare. The packages is where a lot of this magic occurs also as well, because it actually states what applications are part of this overall application. So these are all considered separate applications. So here is app 1, its own public folder with an index, its own node module. So what I ended up having to do when I cloned it, and there's probably some way of doing this, but I don't really know. I just went in and you could see I went into the terminal of each one of those projects and had to do an npm install. I don't know how, I mean, you could create a script or something, but there's got to be some way of actually installing all the dependencies for all the applications inside, this project here. But what I ended up doing is I just opened up the command line to each one of the projects, installed their dependencies, and then once I did that, I was able to then run this project. And you also have to do an npm install on the global as well. So doing that, it's now running on this this terminal here. So to see that application, hell, I got so many windows open. I'm just going to go ahead and restart this. So npm run start, and this is a good example too. So you can see that it's executing 3 different packages. It's going to fire up 3 different processes here, which is one of the reasons why it's running this in parallel. But it will actually fire up 3 separate applications, open up 3 separate browsers, so all of this stuff runs. All right, and here you can see that. God damn, that's using a lot of resources. So I have a lot of different processes running and all that, but that was it like shut down like my recorder and everything just now. All right, so here is the example of the GitHub project that I just linked to. So you have this container project that we saw, app 1, app 2. App 1 is just simply using React state to really React context to implement or to add 1 to the number here. And then this is using multiplication, so it's just multiplying by 2, whatever the number is. So you can quickly get into a huge number here. The separate apps, though, you can see that they're running on different browser instances. So one of the benefits of doing this is that you could have a team that is assigned to app 2, and they could just be working on app 2 in isolation. And then you could have a team on app 1. My dog is making tons of noise. So the real interesting thing I think about this is that you could see the state of these 2 applications that are running inside the overall container project. And then this is app 1, this is app 2. So their state is not actually shared here. So you can see that they're actually separate running applications, and that like just because this app 1 is run, basically this is not an iframe. So a lot of people say, okay, well, this concept is great. It's basically an effing iframe, right? But it's really not. So the idea here is that you can truly work in isolation on different teams, and then bring all these different applications into one, and then they can communicate with each other. So that is really the idea, and it's supposed to be like a fundamental way that we're going to be writing our applications from now on. And I apologize tonight if I'm a little bit back and forth. I have a headache and I'm doing this video anyway. But so one of the things I was looking at here is like this is the pull request, the merge proposal that he had made for the Webpack project to actually bring in Module Federation. And he has a few websites that are out here. One is this Module Federation example. So he's actually showing you can have, and Single Spot allows you to do this as well, but you can have like an app that is literally having a component that is Angular, another component is Vue, another component is React, and they can be separate React applications. You could have a Create React app, a non-Create React app, all running in one shared project. And the biggest benefit of this is that when a project changes, so we call those features in the web development world. They're, you're working for a website company or whatever. They want to add some new feature, maybe it's a counter app or something. The idea is that this Federated Modules is going to grab whatever it needs as soon as it's deployed. So there's really no deployment at all, so to speak. So if you're working on app 1, you're not going to have to deploy like an entire monolith application, all the code that goes with it. You're simply going to make changes to app 1, and then this container project is going to grab those when it's available based off like server pings, and it uses, I think, hash keys and stuff. I'm not an expert on this at all yet. It's all brand new, and I haven't looked at the source code or anything. But from what I understand, it will reach out. It will say, oh, this app 1 has changed. Let me go ahead and bring it in. So there really is no deployment. You're going to deploy just simply app 1 in its own isolation. No more monolith deployments. All right, and then here we go. This is another website that was created for Module Federation by the creator. You can see that he already has a book out, and you can buy the book. So dude's all about making money on this for sure, like you can see. Now, I guess one of the things that rubs me wrong about this project just out of the gate, number one, the first biggest thing is I don't really know how CSS is going to work in such a situation here. You can see it's not even like totally responsive, although most viewports are not going to be this small. It probably doesn't really matter that much, or at least when it comes to height perspective. But you can see there is some shit going on there that needs to be fixed. That said, though, like how are these styles shared? How are they injected? They're all injected into the page here. So I'm wondering, it's a component CSS will typically prevent styles and such from bleeding into one another. But I guess my biggest question is like, if app 1 is using CSS that is like global and app 2 also needs it, there's still going to have to be some sort of coordination that occurs across teams so that they're not duplicating their efforts. And I would say mainly that seems to jump out at me from a stylistic perspective or standpoint, that when you go to, like, there's going to be obviously global colors and themes and such. So how do these things truly live in isolation if they do still have shared dependencies? But anyway, let's get over to the owner. So this guy, Zach Johnson, he's pretty active on Twitter, and I don't know him at all. He works for Lululemon as a principal software developer. He's obviously extremely smart, and he's very active on GitHub too. Like, so it may not have a life at all outside of code, but that's typically the best coders, right? There's they code all the time. But anyway, some of this stuff, like he's saying, like, companies mailing me about the procurement process for my licensed software, like I know how to set that up at all, blah, blah, blah. But then this person's talking about once it becomes open source, there's going to be 6 or 7 variants of it. So we see that, like, Webpack comes out, then we have something like Rollup. NPM comes out, then we have something like Yarn. There's going to be competing projects most likely for this type of architecture, this architectural approach. So he may be the initial creator, but it doesn't mean that somebody or some company can come along and maybe make it a little bit more user-friendly or have more marketing power behind it or whatever. That's always the case whenever you're dealing with business and technology. Like, one of the things that was so, like, when Google knew that they were sitting on a gold mine, their biggest concern, especially when they brought in the third in charge, I forget his name, it's not coming to me off the top of my head. I should know his name. But not Larry Page or Sergey Brin, but the other guy that they brought in, the CEO that had a lot of corporate experience. But anyway, he was basically telling them, your biggest concern is Microsoft. You cannot let them get a hold of this project and blah, blah, blah. Because Microsoft was big enough at the time to basically be able to take their idea and run with it. So they wanted to make sure that that did not happen anyway. So you can see, though, like, people are giving them advice, like, don't get too cocky, or eventually there will be, I'm sure. He says, do what needs to be done already and sell it, stop talking. Anyway, and then he talks about his slave job and all that stuff. So this dude's a principal engineer. He probably makes a lot of money. But so I guess some of the things, like, he's probably a difficult dude to work with, actually. Like, that's kind of the vibe I get from him a little bit. Like, here's somebody talking about, like he's basically criticizing this person who's giving the iframe argument, which, iframes, as an example, I mean, they allow you to do essentially, in some ways the same thing, right? An iframe will have limitations compared to federated modules, and this guy is quick to point that out, but you can see, like, he's trolling people that have genuine concerns and stuff like that. But anyway, like, an iframe example would be like your YouTube embed video. You can put those in any sort of website, and it's a self-hosted, self-styled, all that stuff. Points to an API on YouTube servers versus your own, and it runs within your application with just simply clicking and no sort of configuration setup or anything like that. So again, obviously he's promoting his new product now, but he says, like, when someone says they don't see the point of module federation, that iframes work just fine, I have to physically restrain laughter. So he's got points behind that, but sometimes, like, these tools, like, you just don't need them, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. But this could end up being a gold mine. I really don't know. It could be a gold mine, and it's certainly something that is gaining traction in the web development world. We've always been trying to decouple our components and our architecture as much as possible so that teams can work as effectively as possible in parallel. So there's not so many blockers, this team waiting on some other team for a feature, or having 18 teams come together on a Saturday morning at 4 a.m. to do a humongous monolith release. It would be nice to be able to release iteratively and as often as possible, and without too much risk, So that is the idea behind all this. I'm curious what you all think about this new project, this new way of doing things, micro front ends, single SPA. Do you think it's like overkill? Is this just another example of, like, web development gone awry kind of thing? I do think that there is definitely potential here to try to streamline some of the dependency hell that we currently have when it comes to, like, node modules and all that stuff. Although, again, when I look at some of the code here as far as like this example running, and I actually look at all the different buried dependencies inside here, there's just a shitload of shit that's still going on with modern day web development. So we'll see. I guess the jury is going to be out on this, but this dude, Zach Jackson, he definitely thinks he's sitting on a gold mine. So this could be you all's opportunity to sort of jump in on the ground level, write a website about it, write a book about it, figure it out, learn how to extend it, maybe contribute to the project eventually. But until it's like open source, who knows where this thing's going to go.